Been amazing. He's a humble person, does care, close to the people. He's a good listener, but at the same time, being a good listener, he does do something about it, and that's what matters from the local members. Please join me to welcome to the microphone Jason Lee, the member for Strathfield, to introduce the treasurer.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather? May we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And can we all put our hands together to Wally and his team? Always a first class. Always a first class event. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, the Treasurer, Daniel Mookhey. I've got a bit of an official bio here, which I'll start with, but then I'm gonna go off piste after that. So Daniel was elected to the Parliament of New South Wales on the 6th of May 2015 as a member of the Legislative Council. He's the son of Indian migrants. Daniel was the first MP in an Australian Parliament and the first Treasurer to be sworn in on the Hindu religious text, the Bhagavad Gita. Prior to entering Parliament, Daniel held senior roles in the Australian Council of Trade Unions and at the Transport Workers Union. He's a formidable campaigner. But I think maybe what people don't know is that apart from being the son of migrants, Daniel grew up in Western Sydney. He went to Girraween High School. And I think Daniel brings those values, those principles to his job every single day. I've gotten to know Daniel a little bit. He has a reputation of being a bit of a tight ass. That is the Australian term. That is the Australian term for being fiscally responsible, which is what you want in a treasurer. But I can say this about Daniel, and those in business would know this. The sort of people you want in your business are those high capability, high integrity, and low ego. Right? And I can certainly say that about Daniel Mookhey. High capability, high integrity, low ego. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Daniel Mookhey.
Well, thank you, Jason, for such a kind and wonderful introduction like that. You say that I'm a tight ass. I like to say that I'm cheap for the people of New South Wales as well. And it's very kind of you to point out the fact that I am indeed of the Hindu faith, and that is my background. And I do think that that does provide me with a unique selling point that no Australian Treasurer has had or has ever had. And that is, I am the only Australian Treasurer who has his own god of money. And I can assure you, I'm praying every day as well. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. I too wish to begin by acknowledging that we are on the land of the Darug, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and pledge the New South Wales Government's ongoing solidarity with all First Nations people as we strive to perfect our democracy by making sure that all of our citizens can participate in it. I also want to acknowledge Wally and his team, an amazing team. Indeed, the Canterbury Chamber of Commerce is well regarded and well reputed for being a thriving hub for Western Sydney business, so much so that this is in fact my first Chamber of Commerce event all year as well, deliberately chosen here in Canterbury, Bankstown with the Canterbury Bankstown Chamber of Commerce. So thank you, Wally, for pulling today's together. Can I also thank Jason as well for your service to the people of Strathfield, but not for your introduction. Kylie Wilkinson, my colleague from East Hills, Charisma Kalyanda from the Amazing Member for Liverpool, as well as the local MPs who are out today fulfilling their ministerial responsibilities but are such powerhouses in the New South Wales Cabinet. That's Jihad Dib and Sophie Kotsis. The Mayor of Canterbury was here, Bilal. He came up to me. I took a photo and he managed to ask me for money, all done in 90 seconds. relentless champion for his community as well. The Deputy Mayor, Rochelle Harika, is here, as well as my good friends, the neighbouring mayors, Karen Pensaboni and Ned Manoon, and John Faker as well. It is so good to see you. Can I also thank and welcome the presence of Commander Adam Johnson from the Bankstown PAC, and thank you and your team at the Police Command for your services that you do render for the people of New South Wales. Peter Rofield from the General Manager of Bankstown Lidcombe Hospital. But also I need to acknowledge, and I should acknowledge, the presence of the chairman and the leadership team of the Canterbury Bulldogs, who are here as well. And thank you very much for hosting. And I know I say this with love, but this is a wonderful opportunity for me to say how much I dislike your football team. I haven't forgiven you. As a long-standing supporter of the Balmain Tigers, now West Tigers, I have not forgiven you for the 1988 Grand Final and the manner in which you demolished us, 24-12 in that match. I still have a lot of grievances, and as a Labor politician, the West Tigers are a natural team for us to support because we do have a lot of faith and confidence in people who keep losing as well. But it is a real pleasure for you to have welcomed us here, and thank you so much for playing host to this event today. I wanted to take this opportunity to start to speak to you about, firstly, the honour that I have as a New South Wales Treasurer of the greatest state in the Commonwealth, the state that has traditionally led this nation, the state that sets the trajectory for our economy, the state that ensures that this nation does well in global markets and global trade. But increasingly, to make this particular point, that where goes New South Wales, so goes Australia, and increasingly, where goes Western Sydney, so goes New South Wales. I've made this point before as a boy from Marylands who grew up in the West myself, as the first Treasurer to come from Western Sydney in about 3 or 4 decades. The point I make is this, is that if you want to see what the Australian economy is going to look like in 10 years' time, you need to come to Western Sydney because this is the place where that economy is being created. Businesses like the Nursing Academy, businesses like the plumbing, that spirit of entrepreneurship, that spirit of welcome, that spirit of risk-taking, the fact that in this place we reward effort for work, the fact that people come here from across the world to be able to create businesses, to be able to hire workers, to be able to look after their families, sets the pace for where the nation will go. And it's an important point to make, particularly in this year, as we start the hard work right now of delivering and developing the New South Wales economic strategy. I wanted to speak to you about how we're taking that spirit into the work that we are doing as a New South Wales government and some of the challenges that we're going to need your help to solve coming up this year. Of course, the most important one we are dealing with is making sure that we are bringing inflation under control. So you have stability in terms of the prices that you pay for your businesses, so you have a calmer environment in which to have conversations with your workforce about their wages, but increasingly so you have the confidence to make the investment decisions we as a state need you to make to secure our prosperity. What are we doing as a government to help bring inflation under control? Well, the first thing we did last year was we were making sure that we ourselves as a government were managing our spending, making sure that we ourselves were not adding to inflationary pressure, we ourselves were not bidding up the prices in competition with you as you strive to make sure that you have access to the skilled labour, the construction materials and the many other factors that are such an important determinant of your businesses. It was the case that last year we did inherit a very difficult fiscal circumstance. A budget deficit of about $12 billion on a budget of 120. This year projected to be at about $10 billion as well. We wanted to make sure that we were paying for our promises as a new government without adding to inflationary pressure. So we're very careful in making sure that we were dotting the I's and crossing the T, or as Jason points out, I was being a tight ass as well to do that. But it's such an important part for us as one of the biggest spenders in the national economy ourselves, to work in partnership with the Reserve Bank of Australia and others to bring inflation under control, to stabilise the interest rate environment, to ensure that we once more go back to what we have been a strong strength of the New South Wales economy, a dynamic, growing economy that doesn't create inflationary pressures. That work will continue. When I give the budget in June this year, you will see the government do the second part of that fiscal consolidation task as we go about turning a $10 billion deficit into what we hope to be about a $400 to $500 million surplus. This is going to be a difficult year for us as we meet that challenge, but it's very important we do that in a manner that doesn't add to your tax burden either. That's a big challenge for the economic team in the New South Wales government. We are looking forward to working with you. Equally though, we have to be upfront about the fact that families are doing it tough, and families in Canterbury, Bankstown are doing it tough too. We are dealing with a once-in-a-generation cost of living crisis. Families have not had to deal with price rises of the magnitude and the scope that they are currently dealing with since the 1970s. And we have to be mindful of the fact that the value of $1 in a person's pocket today is about what it was in 2011. We've lost about 13 years of purchasing power in the economy. And given that they're the people in the local shops, they're the people who are buying the plumbing services, they're the people who are investing in their kids' education, the fact is that living standards falling back by about a decade is a big challenge to our social cohesion, yes, but it's a big challenge to our economic future. Because the reality is, in this economy, most of what we do is we consume. And if people have less in their wallet, they have less to spend in shops, they have less to spend in the economy, and that is a big challenge that we have. As a government, our strategy is simple. We want to do two things. Relief right now, reform for the future. Relief right now, last year we were giving out energy rebates to particularly low-income households. About 1.6 million households in New South Wales are getting credits back on their electricity bills as we speak. Equally, on the relief side, very important here in Canterbury, Bankstown, where you have the M5 and many other toll roads, we've introduced our $60 a week toll cap for families. So if you're using the Sydney toll network, you won't pay more than $60 a week in tolls. A very important return of income, particularly to car-dependent suburbs in southwestern and western Sydney. That's the relief side. The reform side, you'll see us click into gear this year, is in two respects. We've got to rescue the energy transition. When I speak to businesses, one of the biggest things they always point out is they do not have predictability over electricity prices. They do not have stability over electricity prices. And that is a big cost pressure. And especially in southwest Sydney, where so many manufacturing businesses, their profitability and their margins turn on whether or not they have stable and predictable power. So you will see us this year make some catalytic investments in the energy transition so we can once more have stability in our power markets. It's a very tough challenge. No jurisdiction has got it right. But here in New South Wales, the challenge is for us to seize the opportunities that are present by the renewable energies transition without giving up our comparative advantage that we have, especially in our manufacturing industries. The other big challenge that we need to solve together is we do need to build more homes. Right now, it is a huge risk to us as a country and as a state and as a city if we price out the next generation of Australians from the prospects of home ownership. It's always been a strength of our state and our society that if you work hard, you have the opportunity to own assets, and including housing assets. And so it is a big concern that a person today who's in their 20s and in their 30s and increasingly in their 40s are having to struggle as much as they are to be able to meet mortgages, to be able to pay rent, but to be able to aspire to the whole idea of home ownership. So that means you're already seeing the government roll out a reform agenda. My message to this room, and particularly to those people who are heavily engaged in the housing debate, local government, federal government and in business, is simple. The New South Wales government is pretty firm about the destination we want to reach. We need more homes. But we are flexible about the route. And we are more than happy to partner with everybody and to make the adjustments to respect neighbourhood character no matter where it comes, so people understand that they can have the benefits of more homes and keep what they love about their neighbourhoods. I make that point here because so much of that has already been pioneered in southwestern Sydney, where so many of the councils themselves have led this debate. And I'd say this in other rooms in which I am, look to councils like Burwood, look to councils like Canterbury, look to councils that have managed how to increase housing supply for their residents and use it as an opportunity to rejuvenate communities and keep neighbourhood character. There's a great story to tell that's coming out of southwest Sydney. We want to partner with you as we tell it. Now, of course, that we've got other challenges that are coming up. We have a big challenge coming to this community this year as we go about converting the Sydenham to Bankstown rail line. I know that that's an area of concern. I know we'll be able to talk to people about what we are doing there, but we want to get that right. We are very much interested in working with partnership with the Chamber, with local businesses, with local councils, as we make sure that this part of the city thrives. Because, as I said, when this part of the city is thriving, the state's thriving, and the nation's thriving. Thank you to everybody except the Bulldogs. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I'm looking forward to insulting this team more. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, the Bulldogs is in my heart, so... The person who's going to hold the conversation with the Treasurer is none other than Kiri Karagianis. Kiri is the current Chief Financial Officer of Unity Bank Limited. Kiri is an experienced financial services professional with over 33 years experience in banking and finance. Kiri has extensive experience in retail and corporate banking in the areas of finance, treasury, credit, product management, marketing and sales support functions. Kiri, would you please join us?
Good afternoon, everyone. Daniel, how are you? Good, good. My wife calls me a tight ass every day. You're not the only one. I've got a couple of questions. Looking to chat a of topics today, time permitting. And to kick off, I'd like to ask you a little bit around the New South Wales Treasurer's role. You've been in that role now for almost 12 months. What are the things that you like about the role?
Well, having lunch with the Canterbury Bankstown Chamber of Commerce is a big thing I like about the role. I like the fact that frankly, as Treasurer, you can nerd out. And equally, you have the opportunity to really help deliver big change. And it's really humbling. It is, you know, as a person, and particularly, I'm the son of migrants who came to New South Wales in the 1970s. As some of the first people from the subcontinent who got to benefit from the end of the White Australia policy at the time, the fact that it's possible to go and to make a contribution in politics says a terrific amount about this country and this state, how we welcome people, the shores, how we respect the fact that we are a collective endeavour as a state. And as New South Wales Treasurer, working as part of a newly elected government that is pretty collegiate, that it works through problems, that's pretty pragmatic, there's an immense opportunity to provide change and lay the foundations for a fairer and more prosperous future.
And how fortunate are we to live in New South Wales and a country like Australia? No doubt it's also been a challenging role for you. What are some of those challenges that you've had, particularly in managing, you know, public expectation?
Yeah, well, I've got to say, I mean, I give credit to the previous government for the manner in which they responded to COVID, which was a big challenge, and no one had a playbook, no one had it right. But it's fair to say that that did create quite a lot of fiscal pressure on the state. The biggest, sharpest increase in debt that New South Wales has experienced since the war, the fact that I and the government inherited about a $13 billion deficit, which is the second biggest in our history as a state, the fact that we are having to operate and at a time of high has proven to be quite difficult and quite stressful, and it has meant that we've had to make some pretty tough decisions. But we did make the point that the tough decisions we make now will enable the state to make better investments into its future shortly. And so I'm looking forward to getting on with that job and doing what we, particularly this year, putting that phase behind us and starting to see what the future of the New South Wales economy will look like and driving towards that.
Fantastic. How do you manage those challenges from a day-to-day perspective? Because you've got people coming to you from all parts, within government, outside of government. No doubt it's a big juggling act.
Yeah, well, I already told you I start my day by praying to my God of money, which helps every now and then. But look, it's hard. Like, prioritisation is very difficult because the demand on the public dollar is endless, but the supply is not. And you do need to have a pretty strong sense of principles and a sense of mission as to what we are doing as a government and why we are doing it. That gives you the ability to reconcile the day-to-day with the medium-term, the long-term and the strategic. We as a new government have been elected to make sure that people have access to world-class public services. We've been elected to make sure that New South Wales businesses continue to prosper. We've been elected to ensure that the New South Wales public finances are rigorous and predictable. And so slowly, surely, we're being pretty candid with people about the challenges we face, but also we accept the fact we're accountable for the decisions we're making.
I wanted to touch base on the New South Wales economy. Number of economies worldwide are doing it tough at the moment. Some have gone into recession. How are you seeing the New South Wales economy right now?
Yeah, well, I think we've got a really, really pleasing piece of evidence this week that we are managing these complex forces relatively well. For the first time in 2 years, real wages grew in New South Wales in the December quarter, which is the start of us rebuilding the purchasing power of New South Wales households, which is the long-term source of strength for the New South Wales economy. There are two big challenges that we've had over the last 3 to 4 years. That is, the government has been the biggest source of growing demand in the New South Wales economy, which is what was appropriate when we were dealing with the after effects of COVID pandemic. And I make that point. At the time, we gave bipartisanship to the previous government. We very much supported what they were doing in terms of protecting people's businesses, protecting people's jobs. But the reality is that governments can do that for a period of time, but ultimately we need a strong private sector, and to have a strong private sector, you need households that have confidence in their economic future. So the fact that we are seeing a bit more of that return is welcome. The fact that we are seeing perhaps what market would observe as the peak of the interest rate tightening cycle is really welcome news. We have to, of course, we respect the independence of the RBA, but it's fair to say over the course of the next year, the next 2 years, we're hoping that there's a capacity for us to normalise interest rates, and we will see that, therefore, without going into a recession, we've gotten through this challenge.
Thanks, Daniel. In terms of some of the economic headwinds, what do you see as some of those happening potentially over the next year or so?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, we are paying close attention to some of the big decisions that the US Federal Reserve is making. We're paying big attention to what the Bank of Japan is doing. Crucial part of our trading environment and do set the tone and the pace. So they're very big forces that we are paying very close attention to in terms of the economic headwinds. But equally, we can't ignore the fact that we're living in a bit more of a turbulent political times worldwide, and that's creating economic stress and pressure and uncertainty. And so we obviously want to work in partnership with the federal government as we navigate those complicated dynamics. But once more, it's an opportunity for New South Wales to do what it does best, which is to lead the Commonwealth and how we respond.
You mentioned within your budget you're forecasting some surpluses over the next few years. Some say at the expense of some of those policies, committed policies, and some of those projects. How do you make sure, or how do you weigh up the surplus versus those key projects that you need to make decisions on, particularly for the communities?
Yeah, well, firstly, with the New South Wales budget surplus, and this year very challenging, and I've made this point publicly a few times. It's inherently uncertain. I'm not betting my house on it because we are trying to turn a $10 billion deficit into a $400 to $500 million surplus. To some degree, that's being achieved by the fact that there's a lot of COVID programs and flood recovery programs and bushfire recovery programs that are coming to the end of their sort of peak spending time, and so that is a big part of how we are achieving a surplus. But you're quite right to say it's not easy, and you do need to prioritise. But I just make this point. What we're doing as a government is no different to what every business has to do and what every household has to do, which is when things are more expensive, you've really got to ask yourself whether you can afford it. And people do that in their business. Anyone who's refinancing a loan right now would know that. To put this in really stark terms, when I became the Shadow Treasurer, New South Wales was borrowing its 3-year debt at roughly 0.43. When I gave our budget, we were paying 4.98%. It had gone up by more than a factor of 10. If that happened to any of the businesses in this room, of course you'd be looking at every single dollar you're spending to make sure that you are sequencing what you're spending on right. And it does mean you have to make tough decisions. But I can't look businesses or households square in the eye and say that you need to make those tough decisions, but the government doesn't.
Thanks, Daniel. You touched on it, interest rates, very important, very topical at the moment in your initial discussion. The RBA recently met, official rates on hold, they're citing underlying services inflation, and you mentioned the government's doing a fair bit in that space. Where do you see interest rates going over the next 1 or 2 years?
Well, if I knew the answer to that question, I'd probably be a lot richer than I am. But all I can say is I rely on what the RBA says to the market, and of course New South Wales Treasury pays very close attention as well. Our general view is that we are at this interesting inflection point where the market thinks that we're at the top of the interest rate rising cycle. I wouldn't say that 100%. There are conceivable circumstances in which the RBA makes a different choice, but I'm not going to speculate. But there's equally conceivable scenarios in which they go the other way. The point I would make, though, is that the era of 0% interest rates is unlikely to return anywhere in the market anytime soon. And so what we're likely to see is more of a reversion to normal or neutral, is what a lot of people who pay attention to this are saying, and I have no reason to doubt their judgment.
We have a similar view within our business as well, so it's very similar. Some believe that the government spending is a key lever in this inflation equation and may have fueled some of that higher interest rates. But many in this room particularly rely on government projects to keep their businesses ticking along. How do you balance government spending and the inflation equation?
Yeah, well, it is true to say that there is evidence that the government is bidding up prices. And that was a big reason why when we came to power, we did look at precisely everything that was in the infrastructure pipeline and asked some pretty tough questions about whether or not it needs to go ahead. It has to go ahead now, and whether or not it's going to return the benefits that were projected at a time when interest rates were a lot lower. Put it really simply, we're paying a lot more money to borrow from our kids and our grandkids. We've got to be sure that what we're spending that money on is creating a bigger economy for our kids and our grandkids. And so we did have to make some tough decisions about things that shouldn't go ahead, things that can go ahead but not now. And so we think we've gotten the balance right. And we think as a result, the market has certainty and predictability about how much we'll be spending. But I will make this point. It is, and this isn't a partisan point by any means, the last 10 years, 20 years, you've seen the New South Wales government spend a lot of money on transport infrastructure, especially, and the New South Wales government will continue to spend a lot of money on transport infrastructure. But it's fair to say that we also need to spend more on schools, on hospitals, on social housing and other forms of social infrastructure, which comes with a slightly lower price tag, but just as important to ensure that everybody has access to world-class public services.
You mentioned around housing affordability. The government's identified that as a critical topic. That's an important focus area for us as well at Unity Bank. We're working with the government around the New South Wales Shared Equity Home Buyer Helper Scheme, which is a fantastic scheme to get people into their homes. That's one of the key things that you guys are doing around building housing affordability. What are some of the other things you mentioned before around housing density changes, supply, and particularly how can everyone in the room assist the government to deliver some of that housing?
Well, firstly, what everyone in the room can do to assist the government is just be honest about the challenges that people in the room are facing. I meet businesses all the time who make the point that they can't attract skilled labour and they can't keep skilled labour. And equally, people making the point that a lot of their skilled labour is upping and moving to Queensland and to other places in which things are cheaper. So we actually need that voice to be heard in the debate. The second thing is we do need partnership approaches. We're not going to pretend that we know everything about every little neighbourhood, and that's why we are welcoming the opportunity to work with local government to get this right as well, and to learn from what's gone well and what has not gone well as well. But the third thing you'll see us as a government do this year is you will see us introduce some more of the innovative and newer ideas about how we can get more housing built quicker, especially on government land, especially in sort of the social affordable housing space. We're looking forward to having that conversation.
I'll jump onto transport and industry, which is also a pretty pertinent topic. There's a number of changes that the government's enacted within this portfolio you've worked in before. What are some of the changes that are impacting here in the Canterbury Bankstown region? Is there some things there? And again, how can our members get involved in developing that portfolio?
Well, of course, the big one is the Sydenham to Bankstown conversion, which is transformative for this region if we get it right. It's fair to say that when the government came to power, that project was not on track and required, in fact, was one of the most intense pieces of work we did last year, was to figure out how to rescue it. And that did involve us having to inject about $1 billion extra into it. We get how crucial that is, but we also get how tough it's going to be in that interregnum period in which we have to do the building. So we do want your help to be able to manage the fallout from that and to make sure that people have access to alternative transport services. I know the local members are very vigilant about this. They're relentless about making sure that we get the right support in as this community goes through that transition. And that does mean, though, that people coming in from Bankstown will be able to get to the city really fast and be able to get to the North Sydney and to the other parts of the city really fast. I think that it is a big challenge, but it's something that we're pretty determined to get right. And after years and years of different governments promising this infrastructure, we have an opportunity to realise what it promises to the people of Canterbury and Bankstown and the wider southwestern Sydney region.
Quick question. When can we get the Bankstown line extended out to Badgerys Creek? And
get a number of
those southern western regions which are screaming for transport.
Yeah, well, there's no point bargaining against yourself here. And there's no point negotiating down. So I well and truly hear your message here. It's fair to say that we've got our hands full with the Western Metro, we've got our hands full with the City Southwest Metro. I am a big believer in getting those projects right before we commit vast sums of public money to the next ones. So, and rest assured, those two are challenging enough. But we have, incidentally, in the last budget, put aside money to begin the planning work on that, and that planning work is underway.
Daniel, thank you very much. I don't have any further questions.
We're going to take some questions from the floor. So any questions, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. Any questions to the Treasurer from the floor? State your name, please.
My name is David Amanadine. Thank you very much. What an articulate way you put it across. I can see you've got a lot of intelligence and you use the word nerd, which I don't mind for a Treasurer. Life has been about growth as a treasurer and as an economy. We do want growth. In nature, not everything is progress. There's ebbs and flows, ups and downs. Holistically looking at it, even though we may be growing and we want to grow, but the nature of my business, I'm in transportation. We've moved in excess of 140,000 people in 18 years, all over the states. People are suffering. Families are not doing well, significantly. Domestic violence is on the rise. So my question is not only how you're going to make us more money, that's not the question. How do we have a holistic economy where people can have a chance to do well, mentally, emotionally, physically? Thank you.
Well, that's an excellent question. And you're quite right to say that we have to think about how we, frankly, budget for that. And what you'll see us do as a new government is start to introduce new ways of measuring how much progress we're making on domestic violence, How much progress are we making in protecting our ecosystems and nature? How much progress are we making in ensuring that everybody has a fair access to schools? How much progress are we making in ensuring that everybody has the opportunity to rise? One of the things I announced 3 weeks ago is that in the principal long-term economic planning document that the New South Wales government produces, which is called our Intergenerational Report, which is produced every 5 years, which gives people a snapshot about what our future is looking like and what our future could look like. For the first time, we're going to expand that beyond pure economics, or traditional economics is the way I put it, and start to incorporate social wellbeing and social progress data and projections, because you're quite right to say you can't have a strong economy unless we have a strong society. And we're not just running society in service to the economics needs, it's the other way around. And as a Labor politician, dare I say, I'm pretty invested in ensuring that everybody has a shot. And that it's no longer just a piece of rhetoric. We are wanting to embed that in how we plan for the future of the New South Wales economy. You'll see some of that work in the next 3 years.
Treasurer, it's Antoinette Khalil. I had a question. The Liberal Party last year gave a big project such as West Invest. Yeah. And that was a great initiative to help communities, local communities. And I was just wondering, does the Labor Party have any consideration or idea of whether they're going to bring back such a big initiative such as West Invest?
Well, you'll be pleased to know that there was, in respect to the West Invest program, there were two components to it. There was $2 billion that was made available to community groups and councils, for which we matched, and we said we won't disturb that. And in fact, that money is rolling out as we speak. It's fair to say that there has been some issues to do with how that money, what projects were chosen, how that money was allocated, who got what, who got the opportunity to pitch for that. And there will be some reporting coming into the public domain about that component pretty soon. And so I'm going to wait for that report to be released before I comment on how well that has gone or not gone. But in respect to the other component, which is the $3 billion of state government money, you'll be pleased to know that, of course, we supported that. Of course, it's in the budget. But we did go to the election last year saying we had a different set of priorities for what to spend that $3 billion on. And if you want to know what that priorities are, that's Canterbury Hospital. Canterbury Hospital is getting its first upgrade in more than 3 decades, funded by that program. That's Fairfield Hospital, which is getting the biggest injection in terms of its hospital it's had since the 1980s. That is equally Bankstown is getting its part of both the schools component and the hospitals component of that program. Mount Druitt is getting more beds. Nepean is getting more beds. Blacktown, where I was born, getting more beds. So we went to the last election saying, if you vote for Labor, Labor will spend that money on Western Sydney schools, Western Sydney hospitals, and that's what we are doing.
I think my question probably goes on from the one that happened just over here before, so maybe just sort of taking it just a little bit further. It was really interesting hearing you talking about reform for the future. Oh, sorry, Philip Petrie, I'm a disability service provider, and I also represent disability service providers as the Chair of National Disability Services in New South Wales. Over 500,000 people in New South Wales live with a functional disability. Some of those people have access to the NDIS, but many don't. And I suspect there's probably even a considerable number of other people in New South Wales who also struggle with being able to access basic services. What do you see as being the future in New South Wales of investing, particularly, say for example, in our children and our children who are going to struggle? Being able to participate in our community, contribute to our economy because of disability?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a really tough question, and I wish I had really simple answers, but I don't on that one. It's fair to say that we are having some pretty good and pretty robust and some pretty tough conversations with the Commonwealth, who is looking to see the states pitch in and more when it comes to providing disability services, so they can, in effect, just make some different choices about who's entitled to the NDIS. we've made a very clear position to the Commonwealth, which is we don't want disabled people with disabilities to suffer just because the federal government has a budget challenge. And I have budget challenges. Every other state has budget challenges. They have budget challenges. It's not pleasant, but they need to manage it. And that's the first part. The second part is when it comes to what we're doing in respect to disability reform, as part of that conversation, we are going to be pretty clear with the Commonwealth that if you want the states to step back into this space and reverse what we all agreed 10 years ago, which is it should be a Commonwealth responsibility, because fundamentally a person with a disability should get access to the same standards of care in Queensland as they should in New South Wales, as they should in Victoria. But if you want us to go back into that space, we're going to have some pretty tough conversations with you about making sure that we can afford to do so. And we are doing that. That's the first bit. But separately, and this is a really important issue, right now we are having a fight with the Commonwealth about how we fund our schools. And we are having that fight because we think that public schools should be funded to what they were promised. And the state is on a pathway to ensure that we're putting in exactly what we said we would do. We need the Commonwealth to come to the table. And I make that point especially because if the Commonwealth were to do that, we'd be in a much better position to expand especially the foundational supports for kids with autism in public schools. And so that's not a fight that we're shrinking or shirking from. It's a fight that we are taking up with our federal Labor colleagues because we think it's the right thing for New South Wales and incidentally Australia too.
Hi Daniel, Jason Araj. My question is a bit multifaceted. The last Liberal government spent in excess of $1 billion rebuilding stadiums, Allianz and obviously Combank in Parramatta. Neither of them had a roof over them. We've got a Swifty concert tonight in which it's projected to storm quite heavily and a lot of people are going to get wet, I guess, in that stadium. But more specifically, we've got a precinct around Olympic Park and Parramatta, which has two stadiums, and we've also got a connectivity system through the metro being built. But yet, there's nothing really that gets the businesses getting a benefit from that connectivity of the light rail and the metro that's going to be implemented into that precinct. I've had a chat with a couple of people about government support towards getting stadiums, those two main stadiums, Olympic Park and Accor and Parramatta Stadium, and getting the rugby league teams predominantly playing around those two stadiums as opposed to suburbia. What is government going to do? Are they considering anything around getting teams to play, I guess, in those two particular stadiums, getting roofing over those stadiums to get, I guess, hospitality and other big celebrities to come out and do their concerts here in Australia and in Sydney particularly. We've got a great facility and a great city which can host some significant enterprise. What is government's position in relation to sporting arenas, those two sporting arenas particularly being used for major clubs and also getting a roof over those particular stadiums?
Okay, well, it's a great question. Firstly, you're right to say that tonight about 50 to 60,000 people will be gathering for the second most sought after event in New South Wales today, after the lunch with the Treasurer here as well. I will make this point that the two stadiums you mentioned have recently been subject to upgrades of different forms at great public expense. And other stadiums have too. Which ones did you mention? You mentioned Allianz?
Allianz, which was about nearly $1 billion to just redo what it was existing as.
Yeah.
And obviously Combank Stadium in Parramatta.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And so I'm not in a rush to spend more money on them, it's fair to say, given that we've spent $1 billion in the last 10 years and the Parramatta, as I knew it, the old Parramatta Park, Combank Stadium is pretty new, first point. Secondly, we are incidentally providing $300 million to upgrade Penrith Stadium which we said we would do, which is going ahead as well. We are in conversation with the NRL and the Bulldogs and the Rabbitohs and many others and the Seagulls and the Tigers who also have a view that there's more investment required in their suburban grounds. So we're going to allow the NRL, I guess, and those clubs to work out whether or not they want to play locally or they want to play in those two facilities before. It's probably a bit presumptive of me to say that is something they should do or not do, and I don't really know if that's what they want to do as well. I think it's a great thing that the Bulldogs play in Belmore and seem to beat my team here a lot. And equally the Tigers and Leichhardt. It's an important part of our city's traditions. So that's the first point. The sort of other point I'd just make as well is you'll be pleased to know this government did change the policies around events so we can have more concerts at stadiums. Given that we've invested billions in them, it was an anachronism that you could only have 4 concerts a year, particularly at the OSFX. And so the fact that we've now lifted that to 20 is a big reason why Tay, Pink and others are interested in coming here. And for what it's worth, my own personal preference, I really would like to see the Queen Beyonce come soon, and would like to make the point that there's now 16 more days in which she can play in a massive stadium, which is good for the people of New South Wales, good for the economy, and good for us Beyonce lovers.
Thank you for coming this afternoon, Daniel. I have touched on my question privately with you, but the initial question that the gentleman posed to you was about the social fabric of our society. And as you know, I did mention to you that I'm involved in general practice and providing primary care, and your hospitals are currently overloaded. I know you're addressing that with more beds and some really great investment. I have a question for you about payroll tax for GP practices, where, as you know, general practitioners have been working as contractors, but that across the board throughout Australia that has been looked at and being viewed now as attracting payroll tax. And that to me is a very great worry. I think practices will close or will have to increase the price at the desk apart from just bulk billing. We run bulk billing practices, we would not be able to sustain that. And one of our practices is already under threat of closing due to skills shortages, which is not your fault either. That's a federal issue. But I think it's got many facets. We're talking about providing a healthy society and providing primary care, and I do think the payroll tax, which I know is at your fingertips and you can control that, is very important. I'd like to hear what your opinion is on that. And I know that there are other, people, like you said, mortgage brokers, but I think when you compare your health, and I'm not being, underplaying the value of people being able to get a mortgage and buy a new house, but I do think a doctor and accessibility to a GP is probably part of reducing the health costs that you're going to have.
Indeed. So just a couple of things, 3 things I'd say about that. The first is, for those who aren't following tax law in New South Wales as adamantly as others, the Supreme Court made a decision that effectively interpreted some GP practices and other practices as now being subject to payroll tax. That was a change in, I guess you would say, judicial understanding that has caused different regulators to have to interpret how to apply it. Secondly, this happened before we came to power, and in December, I think it was, 2022, or thereabouts, or November 2022. So what we did was we put in place a moratorium on collection to allow us to have conversations with your profession about whether or not the claims are true and whether or not the effect is as intended. The Finance Minister is leading those conversations as we speak, and she's having those conversations with the AMA, or the Australian Medical Association, as well as the Royal College of GPs as well. So I don't want to preempt the outcome of those conversations, but needless to say that we are paying close attention to what impact this will have on New South Wales. We do make the point, though, that where there are businesses that are clearly for profit that operate within the parameters of payroll tax, of course they have to pay it. We accept the fact that GPs weren't intended to be set up to that effect. That is not an explicit part of government policy. So we also are having to work with you as we effectively respond to what has been a court decision. And we do look forward to getting that solution in place relatively soon.
Hello, Treasurer.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
GSON.
See.
Yeah, see you too. GSON from Vicinity Centres.
Yes.
So we're a publicly listed owner of institutional real estate assets.
Yes.
Here in New South Wales, we own the Queen Victoria Building, Galleries of Strand, Chatswood Chase. Out in Western Sydney, Bankstown Central and Roselands. And to your point around the private sector supporting government strategic policy objectives, particularly around housing, we acknowledge that. We have to be out there in the community explaining the benefits of how the role the private sector can play in partnering with government to deliver these economic and social benefits. But in terms of your question that you posed around feedback, and I guess in the context of constructive feedback, one of the issues that we're confronting is I think we're seeing planning reform, which we're wholly supportive of, and at Bankstown Central we can deliver up to 4,000 affordable homes on our asset next to a metro station and government's investment in the hospital. But probably on a more granular level, one of the issues we're confronting is around productivity and our interface with the machinery of government. And so on Bankstown, our co-owner is a global sovereign wealth fund, and we have other global capital partners in our portfolio here in New South Wales. And we spend endless hours trying to explain to them the vagaries of the local planning system, but we give them hope that it's changing. But then we have conversations, and I've just noticed that we've got David Ganoon here from Multiplex, who a global builder, who's helping us build our Chatswood Chase asset, which is a $600 million investment in the state. But when we go and talk to these global capital partners, we explain to them that we can't get a meeting with City Water or Transport for New South Wales to deal with a very simple issue. They lose confidence in our view about how New South Wales is investable as a state and as a market. And as you know, we are in a competition for global capital. So I guess the question is, how do we provide that constructive feedback, and what's your advice on what we can do to partner with government?
Well, I'm pleased to announce right now a new service that the New South Wales Government, my office, will be providing. It's called therapy for people with had interaction with the planning system, which is a service we seem to run. So first things first, I'm glad you're speaking up. And secondly, you're not the first person to make this point. You certainly will not be the last. Equally, you are quite right in saying that in order for the state to meet its goals, we need lots of big things to go right, we need lots of small things to go right too. So, a couple of things I would like to talk about. We've caught up before, I'd love to catch up again. And separately, on the specific point you're making around how to coordinate the utilities and the roads, and so you are in a position where you can get your completion certificates as well. We are stepping up the role of the New South Wales Coordinator General, who I just appointed at the end of last year as well, and seeing what we can do to get them to be able to coordinate better. And equally, I take your point about water utilities and your point about transport. I do have a bit of a say in the water utilities as the shareholder of Sydney Water, and it is one area that we are working with Sydney Water to improve and watch that space a little bit. I can't promise a miracle and I can't promise overnight solutions, but it's fair to say it's on our radar.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and for your time, for your honesty, and for being open with all expectation.
Thank you.
So we're just going to end the formality now. Couple of presentation, and then nice and easy. If I might, Kiri, thank you for your time and dedication. Can I invite Anthony and Simon to just a quick presentation, and can I invite the boards to come forward to the stage as well, please? Antoinette, Jason, Jeff, Tracy. Sorry, Danny.
Oh, you miss out?
Yeah, we need
Oh, sure. I thought you wanted